What is the most broken class in Baldur's Gate? And in asking this question, as with all of my BG content, we might be talking about specific character classes or character builds, but I'm going to stay away from certain magic items, naming certain key encounters, because so much of that is the discovery, the absolute discovery of the game itself. So I don't want to pull that away from those of you who are just starting your journey into this really unique D&D Dungeons & Dragons experience. But I do have to say, most broken class for Baldur's Gate 1. Now, I think of Baldur's Gate as both one giant long game, as intended. It was different parts were released over time. But I also think of it as actually 4 parts. So you've got the first Baldur's Gate, then you've got Siege, then you've got Baldur's Gate 2, which is really kind of Baldur's Gate 3, right? Because 1 is Baldur's Gate 1, then you've got Siege, then you've got 2, and Baldur's Gate 2 is really like 2 plus 3 because there's a secondary piece to it. There's a lot of components. I say this to frame it because you're essentially going from level 1 to level epic in terms of abilities, gear. I mean, it really is an amazing Dungeons and Dragons experience. And what I think captures so well is, no spoilers, it pulls in all of the monsters from at least the classic Advanced Dungeons and Dragons universe. So you get that full experience, no joke, of what it's like to play Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, even at normal level, which technically isn't normal level for AD&D rules. You got to bump it up one. It's an interesting experience. Those of you who only know the current edition of D&D, it's a real eye-opener. And some of these monsters are not just stat blocks like they are in the current version, D&D 5. They've got some real bite. You know, if you look at the classic monster manuals from AD&D, you look and say, well, the stats are there. Some of these monsters, you're never going to be able to defeat them. Because even though you're godlike in Baldur's Gate, you're still just immortal. And in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, you're just an adventurer. So it's interesting in playing that. So I frame that because to say, well, what's the most broken class that's out there? If we're just looking at meta, not cheating, not modding, not changing stats, which I'm not for or against, but just look, hey, do a core install, and based on the tactica, whatever you can get away with, you get away with. It is different depending on how you navigate, because certain classes take a while to really come into their own, like the monk. I love playing a monk, but Baldur's Gate 1, monk is kind of ho-hum. Monk is kind of like, just grinding out, really not that great. Where once you enter Siege, it's still a little ho-hum, but it's gaining in power. But then once you enter BG2, BG3 or BG 2.5, whatever we want to call it, Monk is a lot of fun to play. Monk is godlike. So having played through the saga multiple times, I usually start at 1 and go through. But sometimes if I'm looking to play a monk where it's like, I really don't want to grind that, so I'll jump in a little bit ahead. But then, being a completionist, I miss out on the tomes. I'm not going to tell you where. I miss out on the tomes in BG1. And since I ironically primarily play it on a tablet or a phone, I can't mod the files to get that. And, does it make a difference with those tomes early on? Well, it does to me, because I'm kind of a completionist from that perspective. So, yeah, sometimes I got to kind of grind the monk with that. And I love playing a monk, and I usually play a monk in AD&D. Okay, so my vote for the most broken class in BG1, and I'm going to give a few what-ifs. You can agree or disagree. I'd be really curious. But then at the same time, classes that you think. And multi-class, dual class, absolutely, but you're limited in one. So you might say, like, look, this type of class combination, you're super powerful in BG1, but then it fizzles out later on. Or you might say, look, you're not capable of doing this because this type of multi or dual, you can happen, but for BG1, you're going to play out the first part. It's not going to come into power until Siege or 2. Those are possibilities too, but we're just looking at one. My vote, and the irony being, this is a what's the term? Backwards compatible character class. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, there's a lot of D&D floating around in my head. A lot of D&D. All of it good. All of it a lot of fun. Shadow Dancer was a 3.5, 3.x creation. It was a prestige class. It moved out to its own class a little bit later on in various tomes. But essentially, it's like how it's implemented in Neverwinter Nights. It's a class that goes over a class. You move into it. I like the idea of prestige classes in 3.5, 3.x. I like the idea in Neverwinter Nights. But most of the time, you're better off just being a straight class because it's a level-based system, the 3.x system. And at the same time, some of the prestige classes where it's like, it's not really that great. I mean, it's got like one or two novelties, but it's not really that great. Making that jump back to the enhanced version and adding that with the various character classes, the fact that we have Dragon Disciple, the fact that we have Shadow Dancer in AD&D, mapping it to core AD&D rules, really changes things and really makes it exciting. And with Baldur's Gate, meaning some of those what would be considered prestige or subclasses in other editions of D&D that are proper classes, or I guess the proper term for BG would be class kits, some of them are really potent, really powerful. In my opinion, the Shadow Dancer is one of them based on the combat mechanic of how Baldur's Gate works. And this is not a criticism. It is a combat-based game with role-playing elements. The role-playing elements are so good, you're fooled for a while, which is good, thinking it's a role-playing game. But it's about combat navigation and tactics and utilizing clickies and spells and potions and parties. The Shadow Dancer, their ability to hide in plain sight. Well, first off, before we even jump into that, hiding and backstabbing, I won't say it's broken. I mean, there's this idea where anything that, like if I'm utilizing it, it's like the classic D&D game. If I'm using it as a player, it's role-playing. It's balanced. If it's being used against me, it's broken. So, as a DM, I mean, I let my players play whatever class they want, but I'm not going to scream, "Oh, it's broken." But you'll bring your most broken, jacked up combo class, whatever, the absolute worst of D&D 3.5, where it's like, okay, I'm a level 1 whatever class, but I've taken this feat with this race and this subclass and so I'm level 1, but I've got like 10 different abilities and I'm really functioning at like a level 6 character. And you're like, wait, what? Oh, well, I pulled in this tome and I utilized this tome and then I utilized this book and I'm using this book. And you're like, wait, what? As a DM, I'd be like, that's broken. But likewise, when I use some crazy stuff against you, you scream it's broken. So this exists in Baldur's Gate, where backstab is kind of broken, especially in BG1. The fact that you can hide once you're hidden, using the shadows, take your time, moving up. Much harder to do with a party, so sometimes you got a party park, meaning take everybody off autopilot, leave them around the corner, and you got to go up and hide. You backstab, you can do tremendous amounts of damage. You drop certain potions that explode or certain effects. It's just kind of crazy. You could drop some potions, some effects, run off, hide. You could one-shot a lot of things. So right away, what you see as a thief, I was going to say rogue, but hey, this is Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. As a thief class, yeah, you could set traps, and that becomes very powerful, and certainly that's an exploit. The pickpocketing is fun. I still enjoy pickpocketing. I always put some in there. Disarm traps, I'm not doing it for the experience, and with the exception of a few places that are very deadly and just going to nuke me, but you need super high trap abilities, I could just kind of walk through them, or I could NPC it. But then would I take an NPC thief if I'm already primary? My primary tune's a thief. But backstab is very potent, very powerful, especially since in BG1 it's not always detectable. The counter, of course, is, well, look, you have to hide in the first place. And you have to get the hide off and you have to approach, and that's how it's balanced out. Well, you kind of learn that, and there's certain gear to boost your hide ability very, very high. Certainly dumping in skill points, but then certain gear certain combinations let you bump that a lot higher. The Shadow Dancer has that. Backstab modifier is less, but it's not really that crippling. The fact that you can hide in plain sight means I can hide correctly, backstab you, start running away if you're following me, hide again. Let it reset, let the music stop, come up and backstab you. You then also got the Shadow Step sidestep. That is beyond potent, either to hide, pause, definite delivery system, or again with certain items that are in the game where it can turn me super, super fast. I'm moving speed equivalency of a monk or more. Hide, backstab, hit, shadow step, run away. I mean, it's crazy. Rinse and repeat. It might be a little bit dull, but you can pretty much take out anything in the game, including supposed bosses. When you get into other shenanigans, like it's not just about backstabbing, charm person, or certain controls, certain holds, certain abilities there, that gets kind of crazy, where you're like hiding and charming dudes and taking control and sending them in one-on-one to fight. I mean, there is a lot, and it's very hard for the AI and it's very hard for the setups in BG1 to counter that. Jumping into to Siege, it still remains strong, in my opinion, although it gets a little more tedious with the grind. Jumping into BG2 takes a little bit of a backseat, in my opinion, but then once you get into epics and you move into BG 2.5, it's like, here's my Shadow Dancer who creates, I can't give anything away, but here's my Shadow Dancer that creates a Shadow Dancer that creates a Shadow Dancer that creates a Shadow Dancer. And you're like, wait, what? Like, welcome to, chain shenanigans and things like that. In my opinion, it is one of the more broken, if we're looking at the meta, the pure meta, broken classes to play. Now, is it that your definition of fun? Are you looking to explore it? I leave that up to you, because people have different definitions of fun in the game, and certainly there are different character classes and things that you want to build, taking it from there. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to you guys in the comments. BG1, just limiting it to that, the most broken character class. Your opinion.